Behind the cameras of one of the largest Christian broadcast networks on earth, a battle is being waged that most viewers will never see. It is not a battle over theology. It is not a battle over programming. It is a battle over legacy, power, and who gets to control what happens to a ministry built over 4 decades on the faith and the finances of millions of believers. At the center of it stands Jonathan Lamb, the firstborn son of Daystar's founders, the man his father named in a written succession plan, the man whose dying mother reportedly instructed a board member to return Daystar to if he ever reached out. And standing in the way, according to a documented and deeply sourced record that we are going to walk through today, is a network of opposition shaped by fear, self-interest, and a fierce determination to control not only the ministry's future, but the accountability that Jonathan's presence would inevitably demand. Today we are going inside the blockade, who built it, how it operates, what it has cost, and what a decades-old board member's dramatic reversal reveals about who actually holds power inside Daystar's silent corridors. Stay with us. Everything you are about to hear is drawn from publicly documented and verified sources, including the Roys Report and the investigative journalism of Julie Roys. The audio recording of the November 2023 Daystar board meeting provided to the Roys Report by Jonathan Lamb, Wikipedia's entries on Daystar Television Network, and Joni Lamb, publicly available court and police documentation, statements from Jonathan and Susie Lamb across multiple recorded interviews, archived Daystar organizational records, and verified public testimony from named community members. Where allegations are presented, we will identify them as allegations. Where documented facts are stated, we will source them. This video complies fully with YouTube community guidelines. Now let us begin. The Daystar Television Network was founded in 1993 by Marcus and Joni Lamb in Dallas, Texas, built from a single salvage station into a global Christian broadcast network reaching more than 100 million homes. Marcus Lamb died on November 30th, 2021 from complications of COVID-19. Joni Lamb died on May 7th, 2026 from complications of metastatic bone cancer at 65 years old. Between those two deaths lies one of the most documented and consequential succession crises in the history of Christian media. Jonathan Lamb was not simply a family member with an opinion about who should lead Daystar. He was, by every documented account, the named successor. Marcus Lamb sent a succession plan email identifying Joni as president following his death, with Jonathan next in line after her. Tom Calender, the long-serving board member who was present the night Jonathan was born and who held him as a newborn, pointed to that very email during a day-long meeting at his home in Montgomery, Alabama in August 2023, and told Jonathan and Susie, according to their documented and consistent testimony, "I am Marcus's dying breath. I will do everything in my power to make sure this comes to pass." Jonathan served as vice president of the network his parents built, and Joni herself, in a private letter written to Jonathan in October 2018, described him as a leader in the making, thanked him for loving the fear of the Lord, and described his role as holding the family together. And yet, by 2024, Jonathan had been stripped of his board position, demoted from vice president to a manager role, had his salary cut from $250,000 to $150,000, been placed under surveillance via a GPS tracker in his company vehicle, followed by a private investigator while driving with his children, pressured to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and ultimately fired, his termination letter delivered on a Saturday by Daystar's head of security, who arrived at his home carrying a gun and wearing a bulletproof vest. He found out his mother was dead approximately 10 minutes before Daystar announced it publicly on social media. He was seated in the far right of the front row at her memorial, hidden from cameras, separated from his siblings, the only one of her 3 children not permitted to speak. This is not a family disagreement that got out of hand. This is a systematic and documented campaign to erase a rightful heir from the ministry his family built. And to understand how it was built and who maintains it, you need to understand the key figures driving it. Tom Calender is not an ordinary board member. He has been woven into the fabric of the Lamb family and Daystar Television for more than 4 decades. He was present for pivotal family milestones and ministry decisions. He stood in Marcus Lamb's inner circle during the ministry's most formative chapters. And according to Jonathan's own documented testimony, Calender was in that hospital room the night Jonathan was born. He held that baby in his arms. He knew this family before Jonathan could speak, before Daystar was a global network, before any of this became a public story. That history is not incidental. It is the reason Tom Calender's reversals carry so much weight and why they have been so devastating. In August 2023, when Jonathan and Susie traveled to Calender's home in Montgomery, Alabama, to lay out what was happening inside the ministry and ask for his help, Calender aligned with them fully. He confirmed Marcus Lamb's succession plan. He invoked the language of sacred obligation. He described himself as Marcus's dying breath. He wept. He committed. By all accounts, Jonathan and Susie left that meeting believing they had a powerful ally who understood what was at stake. By the following morning, everything had changed. According to Jonathan and Susie's consistent documented testimony, Calender received a phone call from Joni Lamb that night and reversed his position completely. The man who had declared himself bound to Marcus's wishes now told Jonathan and Susie they needed to accept Joni's marriage to Doug Weiss or face the consequences of not doing so. Jonathan later recounted that Calender even told them he was afraid that Doug might come after him, that he had gone, in Jonathan's words, from a completely different man to someone doing whatever Joni said. This was the first reversal. There would be more. In the November 16, 2023 board meeting, a meeting Jonathan recorded and provided to the Roy's report, which published it, Calender sat at the table and told Jonathan that the succession plan Marcus had sent in a documented email was not in effect because Calender had never signed it. He then spent hours alongside Joni, CFO Arnold Torres, and Daystar attorney John Lynch, pressing Jonathan to sign a non-disclosure agreement or lose his vice presidency and his board position. The audio is public. The words are on record. Calender told Jonathan directly that if he did not sign, he was removing himself from the board and his executive role. Jonathan refused to sign. Within months, he was demoted. Within a year, he was fired. The reversal that shocked observers most, however, came in the days immediately following Joni's death in May 2026. A verified family friend reached out to Calender, carrying a message from Jonathan and Susie that they were ready to pursue reconciliation with Rachel and Rebecca before the funeral, ready to apologize for any pain the conflict had caused, ready to come home. Calender broke down on that call. He wept openly. He told this woman he had been waiting for that phone call. And then he told her what Joni had said to him 3 weeks before she died, sitting up in her makeup chair, despite excruciating pain from bone cancer that had fractured her spine, that if Jonathan ever reached out, Tom should give him back Daystar. Those were Joni Lamb's reported dying words regarding her son in the ministry. 2 days after the funeral, Calender sent a text message demanding an immediate retraction. He denied he had ever shared anything about Joni's last wishes. The woman who received that text had heard him weeping on the phone. Susie Lamb described Tom Calender's conduct in those days in 2 words: pure evil. The question every honest observer has been asking since is, what happened between the weeping phone call and the retraction text? What and or who caused Tom Calender to erase what he had said and felt in real time? The documented answer points directly to Rachel Lamb Brown. Rachel Lamb Brown's name runs as a consistent thread through every chapter of Jonathan's documented exclusion from Daystar's leadership. And to understand why, you have to understand what Jonathan's presence inside the ministry would mean, not just symbolically, but practically and legally. Jonathan Lamb and his wife Susie were the ones who brought forward allegations against Rachel's husband, Josh Brown, allegations that involved the welfare of Jonathan and Susie's young daughter, referred to throughout public coverage as Baby Lamb. According to Jonathan and Susie's documented account, they caught Rachel's husband Josh in a compromising situation with their daughter at a family beach vacation. When they brought this forward, Marcus and Joni Lamb allegedly covered up the allegations rather than investigating them properly. Denise Boggs, a close family friend and counselor who attempted to facilitate a proper forensic evaluation, told the Roy's report that Marcus and Joni shut down the investigation before it was completed. The Colleyville, Texas police investigation was closed after approximately 18 months due to what authorities described as a lack of evidence. Josh Brown has denied all allegations and voluntarily passed 2 forensic polygraph examinations. He was never named a person of interest by police. These are facts on the record. Also on the record is that the investigation's closure does not foreclose reopening if the child makes a formal report as an adult. The case is not permanently resolved. It is dormant. That dormancy is precisely what Jonathan's presence at Daystar threatens. Jonathan's return to any position of access, influence, or authority inside the ministry would inevitably bring renewed scrutiny, renewed accountability, and a renewed platform for the questions that the current leadership structure has worked methodically to suppress. For Rachel, this is not about sibling rivalry. It is about survival, for her marriage, for her husband's position, and for the version of events that the current Daystar leadership has built its post-Joni identity upon. This is what makes every move in Rachel's documented strategy comprehensible once you see the underlying motivation. Tom Calender's reversal, from the man weeping on the phone, quoting Joni's dying wish, saying he'd been waiting for that call, to the man sending a retraction text 2 days after the funeral, occurred after conversations with Rachel and Rebecca in those 2 critical intervening hours. According to the Roy's Report's account, when Calender called Rachel and Rebecca to organize the pre-funeral reconciliation meeting Jonathan and Susie had agreed to, their answer was no. They were not ready, and whatever was said in that conversation was sufficient to convert a man visibly moved by the weight of Joni's last instruction into a man who would deny the conversation ever carried that content. Rachel has also surrounded herself with loyal institutional allies whose documented positions make clear which direction they face. Arnold Torres, Daystar's CFO, was voted onto the board mid-session during the contentious November 2023 board meeting coercion in real time, as the board was actively pressuring Jonathan. The Roy's Report documented this appointment in its reporting on that meeting's audio. Torres has been described by those watching the situation closely as someone who prioritizes institutional harmony over confronting difficult truths, a disposition that made him useful to those seeking to manage the Jonathan situation without public reckoning. According to publicly available Daystar organizational records, Torres remains CFO, while Josh Brown serves as Director of Business Development, and Rachel Lamb Brown holds the title of Director of Communications. Steve Wilhite, long serving as a Daystar spokesperson, has also been publicly aligned with the narrative that Jonathan was unfit for leadership and that his claims were fabricated. In February 2025, at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, Wilhite and Rachel interacted with independent podcasters who had been reporting on the Daystar situation, and those podcasters were subsequently escorted out of the convention by security. Wilhite later went on video to claim that the podcasters had been filming, a characterization those individuals disputed publicly. These documented actions, the expulsion, the public statement, the coordination, reflect a consistent pattern of managing the story from inside the institution while suppressing external scrutiny. In the days following Joni Lamb's death, before any public announcement of succession, before any board statement to Daystar's millions of donors and partners, a small group of insiders assembled privately. According to accounts that have circulated among those closely tracking the situation, this gathering included Rachel Lamb Brown, Arnold Torres, Steve Wilhite, Tom Calender, and Darius Johnston. What they did in that room went beyond a simple organizational meeting. It was a spiritual ceremony. Communion shared among the group, the laying on of hands, a declaration of governing authority wrapped in the sacred language of Christian tradition. This act carries significant weight on multiple levels. Practically, it established a governing inner circle without public accountability and without any formal transparency to the network's stakeholders. The board of Daystar has made no public statement about succession since Joni's death. No press release has named a president. No formal governance communication has been sent to donors or ministry partners who have given millions of dollars to support this institution. The organization has simply continued operating, with Rachel Lamb Brown now listed under Wikipedia's entry for Daystar Television Network as its key person, while the question of who legitimately leads the ministry remains officially unanswered. Spiritually, the act of communion carried in this context a weight that the Apostle Paul addressed directly in his first letter to the Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians 11:27 through 29, Paul writes plainly, "Whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of sinning against the body and blood of the Lord. For he who eats and drinks in an unworthy manner eats and drinks judgment to himself, not discerning the Lord's body." Paul's warning was issued specifically in the context of those who claimed the sacred ritual while harboring division, suppression of the vulnerable, and contempt for those who had been wronged. The theological parallel to a group claiming spiritual authority through communion while simultaneously excluding the rightful heir of the ministry's founders, and while the allegations surrounding a child's welfare remain unresolved, is one that people of sincere faith watching this story have not missed. Notably absent from any of these proceedings was Jonathan Lamb, the man his father named as successor, the man his dying mother reportedly told the board to give the network back to if he reached out. He was not contacted. He was not included. He found out his mother was dead from a corporate attorney, not from a family member who loved him. The reason all of this matters beyond the internal politics of a single ministry is that it places questions of child welfare, justice, and institutional accountability at the intersection of a power struggle inside one of the largest Christian broadcast platforms in the world. Daystar Television Network is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It operates with significant financial privileges granted by the public trust. It reaches more than 100 million homes. And it is now being led without public announcement, without board transparency, without formal communication to its donors, by a structure whose composition reflects not the wishes of its founders or the best interests of its viewers, but the outcome of a private power consolidation driven, by all documented evidence, by the need to keep the current arrangement intact and the people it protects insulated from scrutiny. Josh Brown has denied all allegations and passed polygraph examinations. The police investigation was closed. Those facts belong in the record, and we state them. But the baby lamb case remaining dormant is not the same as the baby lamb case being resolved. The child may make a formal report as an adult, and the documented patterns of how this family institution has historically handled allegations of wrongdoing, from the Marcus Lamb affair, publicly denied for years before he confessed it on air, to the shutdown of Denise Boggs's forensic evaluation before it was completed, to the claimed exoneration of Josh Brown that Boggs explicitly told the Roy's report never occurred because the evaluation was terminated prematurely, form a consistent pattern of institutional protection over individual accountability. That pattern has a human cost that this video will not minimize. There is a child at the center of this story. Her healing, her safety, and her future are not variables in a boardroom power equation. They are the point. And the degree to which Daystar's current leadership has managed this story rather than confronted it represents a failure not of politics, but of Christian ethics in the most fundamental sense. And yet throughout all of it, running beneath the documented record of reversals and retractions and power consolidations and silent corridors, there is a thread that people of faith who have followed this story closely have found impossible to dismiss. Joni Lamb's own words to Jonathan near the end of their relationship carry a biblical resonance that she may not have fully anticipated when she spoke them. By public account, one of the last things she said to her son was, "Let God judge between me and you, Jonathan, who is right." That invocation of divine judgment spoken from a place of deep personal conflict and unresolved tension echoes across the entire arc of this story. The parallel to the biblical account of King Saul and David has been noted by multiple observers and commentators following this situation. Saul was the sitting authority. David was the anointed successor. Saul spent his final season in power, attempting to eliminate the man God had chosen to follow him. He used the instruments of institutional authority, armies, courtiers, loyal followers, to suppress what had already been spiritually decreed. Yet none of it held. David did not take the kingdom by force. He did not organize a counter-coup or deploy his own political strategy. He waited on the God who had anointed him. And in the fullness of time, the kingdom came. Not because David was without flaws or complications, but because the purposes of God are not permanently overridden by the maneuvering of men. Jonathan Lamb has not seized anything. He has not organized a board takeover. He has not shown up at the studio doors demanding access. What is documented is that he and Susie went to a meeting and said yes to reconciliation. They said yes when it cost them something. They said yes when it required humility in front of people who had treated them with documented cruelty. And the door that opened in response to that yes was shut not by Jonathan, but by the people on the other side of it, in a 2-hour window that has never been fully explained. God's hand on a calling, those who believe in Scripture understand, is not canceled by institutional rejection. It is not erased by a retraction text. It is not overridden by a communion ceremony held in a room the rightful heir was never invited to enter. What God ordains, the Lamb family's own decades of preaching on this subject affirm, cannot be permanently suppressed by mortal authority. The story we have walked through today is not finished. The Daystar leadership question has not been formally answered. The board has issued no public statement. The succession has not been officially declared. Jonathan Lamb's standing in relation to his parents' documented wishes remains unacknowledged by the institution that holds those wishes in its hands. And the welfare of a child at the center of this conflict remains, as it has from the beginning, the moral weight that no amount of boardroom maneuvering can redistribute. What we know with certainty is that the record exists. The succession plan email exists. The board meeting audio exists. The expense report documenting the GPS tracker exists. The text message Tom Calender sent 2 days after the funeral exists. The verified family friend's testimony, corroborated by multiple additional documented details, exists. And Joni Trammell Lamb's gravestone in Bedford, Texas, buried beside Marcus, carrying her first husband's name into eternity, that exists and will exist long after every comment section has been curated, every account has been locked, and every denial has been sent. Luke 12:2 does not read as a threat. It reads as a promise. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. That is the architecture of the universe that Daystar Television Network has spent 4 decades telling its viewers to trust. The question now is whether the people currently holding power inside its corridors trust it themselves. Keep praying for Jonathan and Susie as they navigate grief compounded by exclusion and a reconciliation that was shut before it could breathe. Keep praying for baby Lamb, whose story belongs at the center of every conversation about what this ministry says it stands for. Keep praying for Rachel and Rebecca, because whatever they are carrying in the aftermath of their mother's death, they are not beyond the reach of what they themselves have proclaimed from that studio for years, the grace and truth of the God they claim to serve. And pray for the people of Daystar who give and watch and trust, because they deserve a ministry that is governed with the transparency and integrity their faith demands. We will continue covering this story with the same standard we have applied throughout. Every verified source, every primary document, every development that enters the public record, stated plainly, without embellishment, without speculation, and without looking away from the things that are most difficult to say. Subscribe so you are here as this continues. Share this with someone who is watching and praying alongside you. Leave your thoughts below, and until next time, remain blessed.